Hello, everyone. Welcome to Justice Serve Daily. I appreciate you being here tonight. We are going to go over some information of Indiana true crime that deals with a serial killer of Herb Baumeister. He was active in the 1980s and 90s, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about this case, but it has been refreshed. So we are going to go through all of it today and talk about what is happening now and what you can do to help spread the word and get information out. So let me go over. To be able to share my screen. I always feel like I'm going to cough when I come on. And then after you say it, you really want to cough. I'll get that out right now. All right. And I'm going to let that totally share my whole screen because you don't need to see me while this is going on. All right. I'm going to tell you the story about Herb Baumeister, and it's going to seem more like a nightmare than a story, especially that right now we know that we have 25 more unknown victims from the bodies that they found. So let me get this started. So Herb Baumeister's family, he is from Indiana, but let's look at his family's history. Sorry, my dog. So here we have information about his grandfather, and that is Eugene Herbert Baumeister. He was born in 1895 in Germany, and he died October 30th of 1980 in Indianapolis, Indiana. He was married to Elsie L. Zindler from 1892 in Missouri. For some reason, her stone doesn't say the actual full date. She died on August 22nd of 1982, also in Indianapolis. Now, this is on Herb Baumeister's father's side. So, Herb's father was Dr. Herbert Baumeister. He was born June 25th of 1920 in Columbus, Ohio. Now, that area is going to be important as we get farther along, and you'll understand. And then he died November 12th of 1986 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Herb's mother was Elizabeth A. Smith. She was born in 1923. And as you look at this, we have strange stuff on her grave. On her information, it said 89 to 90. And then on her gravestone, it said 2013. So the Herb's father was an anesthesiologist. They lived in the Tarkington area of Indianapolis, which is a well-to-do area. which you would expect doctors would. And he had what we'd say, I guess, a normal childhood. But he started to show antisocial behavior very young and aggressive behavior. And then as a teenager, he started playing with dead animals and urinated on a teacher's desk. He also left a dead bird on his teacher's desk as well. So his parents decided to go get him checked, and they diagnosed him as a with paranoid schizophrenia and possible some multiple personality disorder. But they chose not to get him psychiatric help. Now, he graduated from North Central High School, which was in Indianapolis. And he had a hard time making friends, obviously. You would think so. And he, even went out to try to play for the football team and he just couldn't connect with the other students. Now, when we think about treatment and stuff for him, I mean, he was born in 1947. So you're thinking about what was the, psychiatric help back then in the 60s. And then that makes you, you hear about that they did not want to give him help because due to the treatment for psychiatric issues back then, which would have been for shock therapy and being put into a mental institution. And we know the history of asylums and that back then. So that would be one of the reasons why they probably did not. So in 1965, Herb attended Indiana University. He attended for a semester, and then he dropped out. And he, because of his father's insistence, he returned in 1967, but he never graduated from college. Now, during that time, it was a good time because his friends had introduced him to Juliana Sater, who she actually went by Julie. And she actually graduated in 1971. So she went in 67. She had a journalist degree and then, accepted his engagement. Now, he also in 1972 did attend a semester at Butler University, and Butler University here in Indiana as well. But again, he had never graduated at all. So Herb Baumeister married Julie in November of 1971, and they ended up having 3 children. And so through that time, she was raising their kids, and Baumeister Herb was trying to work And he had a hard time really attending any jobs. Don't want to get ahead of myself. Yep, I'm getting ahead of myself. So he would jump from job to job, and he had very unusual behavior. But sometime in the 70s, which obviously we can't track and get info from at this time, also because the hospitals that would have existed back then are no longer operating. His father, Herb's father, actually committed him to a psychiatric hospital, which, you're wondering, okay, what would happen that his father, as a doctor, would go to that extreme? And the wife had only shared that he was hurting and he needed help. So that's all that the wife had shared with anybody at the time. And sorry if I pause. I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss any information that I captured here from a bunch of different research here about Julie. Actually, before I move on, I'm going to say one more thing. So they had a very unusual marriage. And in the 25 years that they were married, Julie ended up sharing that they were, first of all, she never saw him nude. And she also shared that they were only intimate 6 times during the marriage out of the 25 years. She said he would dress in the bathroom. He would come to bed in pajamas and turn off the lights and cover up with the blankets. And said that Herb would say that he was embarrassed of his skinny body. So that tells you a little bit about their marriage. So as Baumeister went from job to job with really bizarre behaviors, the jobs that he got at the time were jobs that people believed that he was able to obtain with his father's assistance and help, because he was well known in the community. And the people in the community that helped him get jobs, he got a job working at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. And they said that he was a good worker, but he had very odd behavior. And that during this behavior, he sat here and gave a Christmas card with himself dressed with a friend in drag. And that was his Christmas card rather than of his family. And he also had incidents where he worked that he sat here and had another job that he got that he ended up urinating on his boss's boss's desk. And although he did not get fired for doing that, he did get fired for urinating on a letter that was addressed to the governor. So that's crazy behavior for sure. And usually if you urinate on your boss's desk, that would be it, wouldn't it? Right? I mean, I don't think they'd give you a second chance to do that again. So with the help of Julie, he had went to go work for a thrift store. And while he worked at the thrift store for about 3 years, he thought it was pretty easy to make money and stuff off of this thrift store. So with Julie's help, they went and they decided to open their own thrift store, which was called Save-A-Lot. And he contracted the Save-A-Lot with the Children's Bureau of Indianapolis so that they would share profits with Children's Bureau of Indianapolis to benefit from their thrift store, which a lot of thrift stores, will do that. Some pays off to a charity and stuff. And so in their first year, they did great. He made like $50,000. Remember, this is back in the 80s. After expenses and stuff, they thought that was great. And so they were also only able to open that because they borrowed $4,000 of the startup money from his mother. So his widowed, the widowed wife of his dad, who loaned him the $4,000 so they could open that together. And they filed that together. So during this time, it was doing really well. Although the people who worked at the thrift store would say he was very erratic, and Herb controlled everything that was going on. He didn't let Julie make any of the decisions and stuff about that. And she would, quiet down and let him, say or correct her if she tried to say anything about, no, that's not what we're going to do. And then she would just be quiet. Well, throughout this time, they had split many times. And so they also talked about that throughout this marriage, they were having where Julie would basically just take off with the kids, and she'd go stay with Grandma Baumeister, who lived out on a lake at a condo, and they would go stay months at a time. And during the summer, they would go spend time with her on weekends, everything, and be gone. And that was just because of the way that their marriage was non-functional. So during this time, there was a predator at loose from the 1980s and 1990s. And I want to make sure I clarify that this is the I-70 strangler, not the I-70 killer. And there is a difference. The I-70 killer that they hunted down and were checking in multi-states at that time was shooting their victims. And this paper is from Richmond, Indiana. That's on the border of Ohio. And it's their Palladium newspaper back in 1990, September 23rd of 1990. And they were finding bodies on I-70 that would come out basically from Indianapolis. As you can see, the map they include, and it goes all the way out to Columbus, Ohio. And these murders happened for about a 10-year span, from 1980 to 1990. And these were not just grown men, these were also young boys. So if you kind of just glance at some of the ages of the boys who were found, you can see that the first one in Hamilton County is age 15. That was June 16th of 1980. That was near Cynthian Road, which is out near towards Fishers, Indiana. Then you have a 23-year-old who is in 1982. Then you have a 14-year-old, 1982, near Fishers, Indiana. Then you have a 19-year-old, again, in 1990. Then you see an unknown age near the Indiana state line. Then we have a 17-year-old, and these are in Ohio now, crossing over into the Ohio area in 70. A 25-year-old in 86, a 26-year-old in 89, and a 32-year-old in 1990. These victims were left either naked or partially naked in rivers and water near the I-70, and they were all strangled. So they had not been able to figure out who was committing these crimes at the time. And, what was going on at all with trying to track of who they thought could have done this. So let's go over here. So it happens that in 1991, the Baumeisters moved because of the success of their business. I'm going to move this down in the middle. Because of the success of their business, they were making good money. They had opened 2 locations of the Save a Lot thrift store, and they moved from Indianapolis to a suburb of Indianapolis in Westfield, Indiana, which was located in Hamilton County. As you can see, just the house itself is sitting on the left-hand side. The property, as you may know, if you've watched any shows and stuff about Baumeister, is called Fox Hollow Farm. At the top right, you're going to see an overview of the site, but this is during the winter time, so there's no trees or anything, with greenery and stuff there, which helps you see better that there was the barn for the or the horse barn that they had, and then they had another property or a place that people could stay above that, so like a guest area, a guest house. And then the bottom right hand corner is the indoor pool of the facility, of the home. So this was a very affluent place in Hamilton County. And Hamilton County is, a well-to-do area in there. So I wanted to give you a better look at Fox Hollow Farm from Google Maps to just appreciate the size of it with all the greenery there. So Fox Hollow Farm they owned 18.5 acres. And if you look, it is completely covered with trees. So all of those acres and stuff from there is predominantly covering the property. You've got where the house and stuff is, and you have opened area behind it, but most all of the property is woods. So you have 4 bedrooms. We've got the indoor pool. You've got the riding stable, and then you have a guest area that's above that. By the way, let me go back for 1 second. The other thing I want to point out is the timing of the murders, that the body stopped getting dropped along I-70. Now, the I-70 route, I just want to point out, Columbus is where, Indiana is where Baumeister's family was originally from, not meaning his mom and dad, not him and his wife. And so he's familiar with Columbus, Ohio. And he kept taking business trips, he told his wife, that they were for the store to Columbus, Ohio. And then remember, his wife said that they would take off for the summer to spend the summer with his mother in her condo and that, or out to the lake and stuff. And then also that she would be gone lots of times with the kids because their marriage was basically non-existent. So as soon as the murder span was basically the 80s to the 90s for this I-70 strangler, who, by the way, I don't want to fail to mention that these people were not just strangled and left nude and stuff like that. They were posed. There was posing involved with the victims. So once they buy this property, he gets into this property in, oddly enough, which we just looked back on, of 1991, that they buy the house. Suddenly, there's no more bodies being discovered at I-70 route. Why? Because now he figured out that he can bury these bodies or have these bodies on his own property and nobody's going to look. So how did we get here to even finding out about Baumeister? Well, there were already rumors in the community about men who were in downtown Indianapolis. They were going to gay bar establishments. And when they would go to these establishments, men were ending up missing. And at the time, there wasn't really anybody paying attention to it, at all. So we have this gentleman, his name is Virgil Vandegrift. He was a retired Marion County sheriff, and he, retired, and then he became a private investigator, and he does polygraph examinations. And he got contacted in June of 1994 at two completely separate different times, but within a week each other, odd enough, where Alan Wayne Browsert, who was 28's mother, and Roger Allen Godlet, 33, were missing. And they went to hire him to ask him about trying to help find their sons. Both of them had went to two separate, not the same, but two separate Indianapolis gay bars in downtown Indianapolis, and then they were just never seen again. And oh, this bothers me. I just found a spelling error. I apologize. That kills me. So while distributing missing person posters, when Vandegrift was out, he learned that Gallet, one of the guys he was looking for, 33, was last seen getting into a Buick vehicle from his friend, which we'll call him Tony. That's not his real name, but we're going to call him Tony. And they call him Tony Harris. The info before from him was in there, but we'll call him Tony. So basically what happens is the Indianapolis Police Department kind of began investigating the disappearance of gay men, and they noticed that they were of similar age and height and weight and all that. And they originally were contacted by Tony. Okay, so when they were contacted, Tony claimed that there was a patron of the gay bar who was calling himself Brian Smart, and that he is telling them, hey, he killed my friend, and that he attempted to kill me with a pool hose during erotic asphyxiation session. So he sat here, and the Indianapolis police didn't take him seriously. They didn't think he was for real. So Tony sat here and went, and he had tried to help by, actually going out and following and going with this Brian Smart guy, right? This Brian Smart guy that he met there, that he feel like he recognized him, and he thought that Brian Smart was paying way too much attention to the missing person poster of Roger, his friend who went missing. And so he went and left with the Brian Smart guy. So this is what information he gathered in order to go to the Indianapolis police the first time. So the Brian Smart said he was a landscaper from Ohio, and he's like, hey, do you want to go back with me to my employer's home? And because he said that his boss was away. So Tony traveled with Brian. It was in the middle of the night. He's heading north out of Indianapolis, which Tony is not familiar with. So when he gets there and gets to the home, he sits here and he offers, for them to go swimming and stuff. And Brian Smart kept trying to get Tony to have a drink, kept trying to get him to drink something. And he was not drinking anything. He would not drink anything. Then he felt like this Brian Smart guy may have taken, cocaine or something, because he seemed like that he was acting like that he had just taken some drugs and stuff too. And so he asked him about this erotic asphyxiation. And so Brian Smart asked Tony to do that to him, and shows him where the veins are on his neck, and he makes him strangle him. And then I'll just say Brian enjoyed that. And then he wrapped the hose from the pool. Remember the indoor pool that, which, by the way, just to share, when Tony goes into that pool area, including the detectives, when they find it, that pool area has tons of mannequins in it, and the mannequins are posed like they're posed and stuff around the pool, like they're part of the party, right? They're part of that area. So Brian wraps the hose around Tony's neck, and Tony feels like he's fixing to pass out. So Tony goes ahead and he just falls back, closes his eyes, and pretends that he's unconscious. And so suddenly Brian Smart relieves the hose, right? He lets go of the hose. Well, then suddenly Tony opens his eyes, and Brian was shocked by this. Now, Tony sat here, and he was, Brian was trying to act like he was relieved that Tony was okay. And he's like, oh, you don't know how, that can happen. And, you know how to play this game right, and all this kind of stuff. Well, Tony was also a bigger guy than Brian. So while Brian falls asleep for a while, whether he thinks due to drugs or due to him drinking, he sits here, and Tony tries to go around the house, and he's looking around. He can tell that it is a lived-in home, that he can see children's things and women's things and stuff there. And he tries to go through Brian Smart's pants where he can find a wallet. But while he's doing that, suddenly Brian Smart wakes up. So Tony insists for them to go back and him to take him back. And so Brian does. He takes him back. So he sits here. He goes to the police, like I said. He tells the Indianapolis police, they don't believe a thing about this or for him. And so they sat here and, they Vandergrift, when he learned about this story and heard about this story that eventually was shared with him, he went and he contacted an Indianapolis police detective that he trusted, which he knew, which was a female detective in charge of missing persons. So when they go out with Tony to try to figure out where he was and figure out where was Peter Smart at, and, that type of thing, he couldn't remember how to get to the house. He could get up there, but he couldn't, there was nothing from there. They couldn't find a Peter Smart name. There wasn't, anything and stuff from that. So they went ahead, and a year later, right, a whole year later, in 1996, they sat here and it charged, 1995, or no, it was 96. Tony sees the person again, sees Brian Smart again. And he goes outside and he takes a picture of the license plate of Brian Smart. I'm sorry, Peter Smart. Brian Smart. He gets his license plate that has an Ohio number, which led them to Herb Baumeister. And that's the only way they did it. Now, the plate itself was an Ohio plate. And now they sit here, and the Indianapolis police detective that Vandergrift trusted was Mary Wilson. She was in charge of missing persons. And she was looking into the disappearance of people as well. And so they sit here, and once they found out that it's Baumeister's, they go and they try to ask to go and check his property. And he is like, nope, he's not letting them check. And then his wife, Julie, they asked too, which he told them, don't allow them to check the property. Now, before we go further deep in here, the other fact that we need to point out is that Herbert Baumeister's son, in 1995, was playing outside and found a skull that also led to it being a completely full skeleton. And when they found this, she waited for Baumeister, for Herb to get home. She's like, hey, your son found this, about where would this be, from, all this kind of stuff. And so he turns around and tells him, oh, that's from my dad, the dad who's the doctor, right? Who was the doctor. Now his dad's already gone and passed away for a long time. And he said he was cleaning out the garage. This skeleton that was his dad's, that was in the garage. He was cleaning out the garage, and he decided just to bury the skeleton outside. So at the time, Julie's thinking, okay, maybe that's a logical excuse of why there's a skeleton buried in the ground, even though it's detached. So she believes this. So when we go fast forward to this time, where they're asking Julie, and she refuses to allow them to search their property then. But by June of 96, Julie is like significantly frightened of Herb Baumeister, because now he has extremely erratic behavior, and so she files for divorce. The the business itself is failing. They weren't making money and stuff from the business. The Children's Bureau of Indianapolis had asked to no longer be involved with the business because it wasn't making money anymore. And so that's when, after she files for divorce, she's scared of him, and then she finally contacts the police in June of '96 because she wants to allow them to go ahead and search while Herb was traveling. He wasn't traveling for business. He was traveling with their son, Eric. And Eric sat here and was with him going to the grandmother's house. So while they're away, she asked them, to go ahead and gives them consent to check the 18 acres of estate. So while they're doing that, they start turning up remains. And part of the thing that they go in, when they go on the property and they're looking and they go into this area, and Julie shows them, hey, this is where my son, found this skeleton. And so they're walking and stuff, what they believe at the time is on pebbles, right? Well, as they look and they're paying attention and they're looking at the area, one of the officers finds a bone. And then they actually realize that the pebbles and stuff that they're walking on are not pebbles at all. They're actually bones. They're actually fragments of bones all over that place. And so they said that he never buried any of the victims whatsoever, that he would sit here and the bones would be burnt under trash and leaves and everything else. And so he would sit there and burn the bones. I would guess maybe he would smash them and stuff like that too, just because of the way that they were left and discovered. So when they find this and they go tell Julie that, hey, we found this and this is what's going on, and she is horrified. She is worried about her son being with Herb, right? And so she tells the cops that she's worried about that. And while they're going through and trying to collect all these bones, but at the time they were saying about 5,500 they were finding, which they said was 5,500. They said was 11. They believe 11 victims, and they only had identified 8. Now you're looking at the screen and you're going, hey, Jesty, there are 12 pictures on there. Correct. And the reason is because when they sat here and did all of this, they also connected that four of the victims they found along the I-70 strangler route were from Indianapolis. And they said that they connected these 4 men, boys, also to Baumeister. So that's why you see 12. And the identity of the 8 that were on the property are there. And as you can see, for instance, the IPD officer who was looking for men, Hamilton was one of them that, she was looking for, and he was found on the property. And that was Mary Wilson, the IPD detective. And then, of course, we've got Browser, who was there, who was one of the people that he was looking for. And then Goodlet, who was also there on the property that they found. So as they do this, they have an emergency custody hearing, and they get where they turn over custody to go to Julie. So the police go to find Herb at his mother's house, and they get Eric from him, right? They get Eric from them and they take custody and stuff. Now, before this, when they went to do all of this, they had not yet officially charged or done anything and stuff with her. So he thinks that the reason they're picking up the son there is due to the fact that, oh, we're getting a divorce and she's, probably just doing this. And so I don't care. So after they determine that these remains and stuff are there of the people, then they have a warrant issued for his arrest. So in this time frame, they're trying to find out where he is, and Rick and Herb's brother, contacts the police because before he found out there was a warrant, his brother Herb had called him and said he needed some money. He was on a business trip. He was in Michigan, and could he send him some? So his brother had sent him money, and then he tried to call Herb back, or Herb tried to call him back again after his brother had found out now he's wanted, and he told him, hey, the police need to talk to you. And so he was like, you need to get a hold of them. Well, after they found the bodies, then the warrant was issued for Baumeister's arrest. And so he flees to Ontario, Canada. And, so we've got all of a sudden, they end up finding his body. I believe he committed it July 3rd, and I think they found the body on the 4th. But at this time, when this first all happened, they had only identified the 4. And although now we have all, more, but not all. And they were talking about, what were they going to learn, or were they ever going to find this stuff out? Because back then, remember, all they could end up telling was your blood type. They couldn't figure out anything else. So on July 3rd is when he committed suicide. He went to a park in Ontario, Canada, and he wrote a suicide note, but the suicide note basically only says, hey, this is because of my failing business and because of my wife divorcing me, and doesn't mention anything at all about the killings. So he shoots himself in the head with the .357 Magnum. And when he does this, by the way, it is said that he had basically posed himself with dead animals, dead birds surrounding him. And if you remember, he had a fascination with these dead birds. So the location of the park is near Lake Huron. It is, it has a beach area and that. And so he never faces trial. They never get a word out of him. He never ends up saying anything. So I'm going to share another part. I'm not going to deep dive into this part of the case. I do want to make sure I didn't miss anything that I wanted to tell you guys about the case itself, but I do want to just address it. Now, Herb Baumeister, he was the oldest of 4 kids, but he did have a brother who passed away before him, which was also in the 80s, that I do want to, bring up about as well. And sorry, I have notes and stuff everywhere of different stuff from that. And he was 49. Baumeister was 49 years old when he committed suicide. And it's just a shame because the only reason this search ever happened was because this private investigator and the Mary Wilson, who was the Indianapolis police detective, kept looking into it. They were trying to get Hamilton County Police Department at the time to go search, and they were not. They were just not doing it. They didn't think it was a legitimate case enough to even go search the property. So they didn't have an actual search warrant the first time they went to the house. They only requested to search. And when they did, by the way, go and search the property and started to find all these bones, they did also go inside the house. And one thing that the person who pretended like the Tony guy didn't know was that he had camera set up inside. So he had was videotaping the strangulations. And there was a police officer that had went to see that saw Baumeister. He's on his way to Canada, by the way. And when he's on his way to Canada, a police officer sees him, and they see him sleeping in his vehicle. And they ask about, well, why are you sleeping in your vehicle? And he says, oh, well, I'm on my way to a business trip, and I'm not far there, so I thought I'd just pull over and rest and sleep. And at the time, the officer sees tons of videos in the car, tons of videotapes. So for those who don't know, those were VHS back in the day, and that's what you would use. So after he commits suicide, they don't find those tapes in his car. They don't know what he did with them. They don't know if he threw them in the lake. They don't know what happened. But it appears that he was taping as he was murdering these people, which is just disturbing. Right? Just disturbing in itself. So later, I will say that Julie ended up that after he passed away, she had bills and everything that came upon her, and she had to file bankruptcy. And after this, she filed bankruptcy and stuff, that her and her children had changed their names for obvious reasons. You wouldn't want yourself or your children being connected to someone like that. There is a lot of television coverage that had been done on the case. Julie Baumeister went on Oprah Winfrey and Oprah asked Julie, did you ask him did he go to gay bars, and did she ask him that? And that her answer to her at the time was, yes, I did ask him. He did say he had, but he said he's never hurt anybody. And so it was very odd. You can't find the whole video, but you can find a clip out there. Now, we find out that the police at the time when they did this search actually recovered 10,000 bones. And then a neighbor came nearby and said that they checked there's a drain ditch that is shared between Baumeister's house and theirs. And so they said, we have found some bones. There's bones over there. So the police go over there and they look in this drainage ditch, and they are shocked by what they see, because there are more giant solid pieces of bone in this drainage ditch, and they could not believe how many. Now, they think the reason that they found some bones is also because bones could have washed down from the water into a section and been gathering, not in the ditch, but in other places. And also that animals were um, picking up bones and moving bones and stuff like that too. So they find, not only when they went to do the search and found 10,000 bones, they also found burned handcuffs in mixed with the bones itself too. So again, 11 men that they thought at back then that they had found, 8 they identified from on the property bones, but right after the Baumeisters move, obviously it's hard to sell the house. And the first couple who purchased the house, which the female was a scientist, her name was Vicky Graves, and her husband Bob Graves, he used to work at a dealership. He had a coworker who he allowed to stay at and rent out the bedroom that was in above the area, so like in that guest area, like above the barn area. Both had experiences, and I'm not going to go deep into it. You can look on several ghost hunting shows and haunting shows about the haunting of Fox Hollow Farm and different things that happen. But the only reason I share this bit with you is because this family, when they bought the house and they moved in, and they were aware of that, something happened on the house, but they thought, the police had been there and they had taken bones. At the time, the wife had experienced seeing somebody who she thought was on their property along the wood line in a red t-shirt. And she said then when she tried to go outside to address the person, that she looked and she thought, wow, the pants itself, or I don't see pants. I don't see pants on the person. She gets her husband. They go searching through the woods. They don't find anybody. They later install cameras and stuff on the property because they're worried about that there's people sneaking on the property and stuff like that. So later on, the person who they were renting the property to, he also worked at the dealership with Rob, he has a large dog, and he went, and the large dog kept reacting funny and barking funny and doing things. And he also witnessed somebody in a red t-shirt running that looked like it was running like from him and running into the woods. And when he went with his dog who's barking to go kind of run after that, he notices that the pants look transparent. And just like what happened to Vicky, suddenly he thinks he either lost sight or it disappeared of the person in the red shirt. Now, the only reason I share this with you is because after Vicky saw her viewing, she saw her sight when she saw the red t-shirt guy, she had found a bone, and she took a picture of the bone, and it turned out to be a rib bone. And the gentleman who was renting from them had also showed, and if you go to the haunting shows, you can see these guys talking about this stuff, where he actually found an actual femur. And so after they turned these bones into the police, they no longer had any experiences with the person with the red t-shirt on. So believe what you will. But I think that's kind of an interesting story. Now, it has exchanged hands several times. There is a new owner now who is cooperating with the police. And I'll show you. I've got two couple videos I'm going to show you. And let me put this up here first. Now, they believe that there are 25 more victims that need to be identified. They are looking for families who had a missing male relative during the 1980s through the mid 1990s. It can be in Indiana, or they say surrounding states. So it's obviously, especially Ohio. So if you're thinking Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, Michigan, and obviously Indiana, if you have a missing male relative, you are asked to please contact the Hamilton County Coroner, and that phone number is 317 770 4415. And the reason that they're giving that number is because if you have that relative, they need your DNA in order to match up to see if that is your relative. So if you know of somebody who has a missing relative, or know somebody who is missing, and I would argue that even it could be a young man, because obviously the victims in along I-70 who were strangled, there were also boys, as we saw by the ages of those particular victims. So I encourage you to please make sure to share this info. And I'm going to show you really quick a video. I apologize for the pause thing here. Let me go back up. And let me hopefully.
Spent the day working to find remains of the victims of Indiana's most notorious serial killer, Herbert Baumeister. Men takes West Fox 59
summer of 1996.
Now, if the video to just hear the recent update, sorry, I paused it. The recent update of that a search was going on this weekend. They already found a new bone already. And this time they took in search dogs. I think it was 11. 11 search dogs went through this weekend, and they're back in there looking for more victims. So they said that they believe the number of his amount is going to be majorly increased in the number, which, they said back then this could be the most, the largest serial killer from Indiana. Well, if we're already talking how many that they know of, which is the 12, and then we're possibly adding 25 more, but yet they're still finding bones. Who knows? And part of this is because the new owner is all for it and is totally letting them participate. So I just want to say that. But so let's listen it, if not watch.
And some troubling discoveries. The remains of at least 11 men, 3 of them still unidentified, unburied on an 18-acre estate out back of Baumeister's home. Police issued an arrest warrant for Baumeister, but he killed himself in a Canadian park the 4th of July, 1996. today. Dogs trained to sniff out human remains back on the former Baumeister property. If we have one dog that has a change in behavior, then we will confirm that with other dogs. Hence, the flag had some behavior that indicated they were in the other human remains. It'll be up to Hound and see what the dogs found today.
This initially began probably 3 or 4 months ago when I was contacted by a family member saying, who we have. We don't know who those people are. Is located.
The search today was as much for the family as it was for the man who bought the property Seeker's driveway looking for Herbert Baumeister's killing field.
There's a lot of people that just disappear, that no one knows where they go. And it's surprising that more family members don't go looking for them, but apparently they don't.
Investigators hope today's search will provide Russ McQuaid, Fox 59 News.
Now, if you fear a missing loved one from the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s may have fallen victim to Herbert Baumeister, coroner, the number is 310.
All right. So what is that coroner in Hamilton County is the one, he's the new elect coroner. And they asked him, why hasn't this been done before, right? Like what, what's the deal? He can't answer for that. He can't say why. He can only speak for himself of what's happened and what's going on. But he cares enough now, trying to give these people answers. And, back then, the view was at the time that the reason that people didn't look is because they sat here and they just didn't care about finding, these people because of their lifestyle, which is heartbreaking. We talk about that in a lot of cases. Just because a teenager has run away before, that doesn't mean you don't go look for her, right? It doesn't mean somebody was, that's like cases we hear about, prostitutes who die or anything. People should not have to worry about being murdered by somebody and should have their dignity back, that they find out what happened to them. So I wanted to update and cover this case, share it. It's obviously an Indiana true crime. It's obviously a serial killer. This man who obviously we can see signs through his childhood of where they had the diagnosis. They did get him checked. They didn't get him any help. And then this is basically what, progressed, whether it also progressed from the paranoid schizophrenia because he was also drinking and having drinking problems and also doing drugs and stuff at the same time. I'm not the doctor to diagnose that whatsoever, but I would argue that this is way past due for them to find out 25 more that we have. 25 more people. And they talk that the bones were just small little fragments. And back then, I understand in the 80s, early 90s, we didn't have all this DNA stuff. We didn't have everything. But now we do. So if you know of anybody who you connect with or know about, or even yourself have a missing relative who went missing in the 80s or mid 90s, male, I would say probably, I think it's teenage range there. I think the youngest was 14. But surrounding Indiana, but definitely Indiana, definitely Ohio, right? And that's not to say you couldn't have had relatives who traveled down here or could have been here or Ohio, being from Illinois, being from Kentucky, being from Michigan. They just need your DNA. Just give a call to the numbers at the bottom of the screen. That's the Hamilton County coroner. Like I said, his name is Jeff Jellison, but I'm sure anybody would take your information at 317-770-4415. And all you need to do is give some DNA, and they will help you hopefully find your loved one and get some answers. So I can now actually see the chat. Hello, chat. Sorry, I didn't mean to neglect you. But you know, when I do the PowerPoint presentations and stuff, and I've been working on that, so it irritates me with a couple of spell check things, but I'll try to recover. It is heartbreaking that these people didn't find these loved ones. And honestly, if we didn't have the guy posing as Tony Harris, right, they never would have found him. Nobody was listening to him, that he thought he could find this guy. Yes, absolutely. Miss Amy, it's only a mouth, the little mouth swab, and that's it. No blood withdrawal needed. Well, I appreciate, yes, I think what way to honor his friend that he went and risked his own life, right? Because he's lucky he got out of there. He didn't know what Baumeister would have done. He doesn't know what would have happened from there. They did say they did find also, just to mention, they did also mention that they had bullets. There were all some bullets and stuff out there. Now, they don't, obviously they can't say one way or the other if anybody was shot, because they can't tell with the bones being destroyed like that and burned. But I appreciate all of you being here. Please share the video, let people learn about it, know about it, and share where you can so we can get the word out. This is the call to action. I'm asking your help. Let's please notify people if they have missing loved ones. This is an opportunity to find out if maybe this could solve what happened to them back then. So I appreciate each and every one of you. We're going to have a new Delphi show that's going to be coming up with the fill in the blanks timeline that we're going to be talking about. And with my lovely crew of investigators on Justice Served Daily. You are all our justice warriors as you help to get the word out. And thank you so much for being here and making sure that justice is served daily. Good night, everyone.